let's be charitable and say maybe the CEOs of these companies aren't completely aware of the scale and severity. I certainly wasn't when I first went there. It wasn't my business to know it. But okay, let's say maybe they are not aware of the absolute scale and severity of it, although they should be. All right, now that the truth is out, let's see, are they willing to actually work on this problem? And I will. Any CEO wants to go see what the bottom of their cobalt supply chain looks like, I will take them. I will take them. Come with me, we'll fly economy, or I'll go in your jet, we'll go comfortably. Either way, I will take you. Let's go down and see this is where your cobalt's coming from. Now that you've seen the truth, let's fix this problem. Because these companies have geniuses who have revolutionized our lives. Solving dignity at the bottom of a cobalt supply chain is a simple proposition relative to the problems they probably solve every day.
But they would have to address it en masse. They would have to address it very publicly. They would have to admit to this problem, and they'd have to publicly state it and make everyone aware, the consumer aware, that these things that we enjoy that make our lives so convenient, these technological marvels that have revolutionized our world, at the bottom of that is slave labor and child labor.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on something very important, because the first question they would be asked is, well, how long have you known?
Right. And that's the problem.
That's the problem.
And so to admit it would be to admit guilt in at least some way, or willful ignorance, or a pretending that they don't know.
Yeah, that's right. All of the above, plus a callous disregard for their fellow human being.
Because it's not shoved in their face.
It's not. That's right. That's right.
Because they show up at Cupertino and they're in this beautiful industrialized building and everything's technologically magnificent. And
isn't it fascinating, the riches that stand atop the shoulders of some of the poorest and most degraded people in the world?
It's bizarre, but it speaks to the human condition. It speaks to what we are. We're so complicated and twisted.
Yeah, we are. And it's not like this is a new phenomenon, right? I mean, riches have been built across the global north on the shoulders of degraded people in the global south for centuries.
Right. We just like to pretend that that's not the case today, when it might be the worst case.
The interesting thing is, in some ways, this truth that we're talking about is uglier and more violent and harmful than slavery in the 1700s, because we claim to live in a time when everyone has equal human rights.
Right.
And we're all created equal and treated equal, and it's the hypocrisy that makes it so much more repugnant. Back then it's like, well, they are fit to be slaves. And it was the way of things. And that doesn't excuse it, but the violence had some kind of mental and social, even religious justification centuries ago. And it took a band of enlightened people to say, no, that's not right. And abolitionists fought and won freedom for slaves in the world. Or did they? Because now we live in a time where you can't legally own another person or exploit them like a slave on any patch of this planet, and yet it happens at the bottom of our global economic order more than people realize. And what's important about cobalt is it's kind of the distillation of centuries of this arc. Because, as I said, there's never been a single example of worse suffering that generates more money and touches the lives of more people around the world than this right here.
The intense hypocrisy of this age we're living in, especially in this country, where we're so focused on social justice and we're so focused on equality and treating people with kindness and dignity, and the fact that we're talking about this and communicating on this on devices that were constructed by slaves.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
That's so insane. It's so hard to admit.
Yeah.
It's so hard to even. I believe every word you're saying, but there's a part of my mind that doesn't want to accept it.
I understand.
That it could be possibly that fucked up.
That's right. Like that we're capable of it.
Right.
And it's surely we're better than this now, right?
Right.
I mean, haven't we fought enough fights, shed enough blood, and made enough progress? That we're better than this. That what we're talking about today can't and shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be possible. But the fact that it is, it speaks to that how little has actually changed in some ways.
And the fact that a small handful of brave journalists are bringing this to light. In light of so many problems that we know about in the world that get all of our attention in the news every day. That this is one of the most horrific.
Yes.
And it's very, very difficult to get information about it.
By design. I mean, by design, it's been that way. It always starts with a handful, though, Joe. I mean, great change starts with a handful of people who stand up and say, this won't, I can't tolerate this. We shouldn't tolerate it. Humanity should be better than this. And if they're lucky and persistent enough, they build a social movement that can achieve some progress. We see this throughout history. The history of human rights starts with some small group of people who want to see something change, something important change, and build a movement around it. But it starts with truth. It has to start with truth. It can't. Dispelling the fictions that power tells us, so that things can stay the same. It always starts with shining light into that darkness and bringing ground truth out into the world.
That truth is so horrific, though. You could see how it would be human nature for the people involved in it to try to suppress it and ignore it and to try to figure out a way to keep this information from getting out, because the amount of change that they would have to impart would be it's a monumental task to change the structure of how this stuff is acquired.